Gentleman yields back. Subcommittee will proceed to a second round of questioning, and so I recognize myself for an additional 5 minutes, Mr. Weinstein. And I want to sort of continue the same theme, and I appreciate your inclination to be accountable, Mr. Weinstein, and I'm not trying to suggest either that you're solely accountable. But I guess the thing I wonder is how we've gotten here. I read you the quote that Director Abizaid gave in response to a question from me, and I was trying to get at the thing. I mean, it seemed to me, I'm a layperson, you're a security expert, but I think millions of Americans have watched that, from the beginning, from 2021, from the run-up from the election to 2021, immediately to an historic level of border crossing, and we were told all along that the numbers of gotaways are significant, meaning that there are a whole substantial number of people coming into the United States who are never encountering anyone, any government official, and to a point you just said that's kind of chilling. We got people who are, I don't know how the terrorist watch list works or what exactly that looks like or how people get on it and so forth, but it's incomprehensible that such a thing exists, and that even the vetting is so bad that those people don't get identified as they come across. And then I remember seeing the news article on that, and what it indicated was they were arrested, and then it listed the cities they were arrested in. And it was every major city in America, it sounded like. And but then, I sit up here as a layperson asking the questions that seem obvious to me. Candidly, sir, I don't know that I remember your coming out and making a public statement that the administration is engaged in reckless policy. I don't think you've done that. Frankly, Chris Wray has begun sounding increasingly alarmed in his rhetoric, but I read from you what the director of the Counterterrorism Center said. No, we don't really think that's a risk. And now the evidence is cropping up. So far, thanks to God, we have not seen a spectacular act of terrorism. But you're still sitting down here, and the priorities you're identifying are changes in, an October 7 attack on Israel, which sounds like a make-weight to me as a tremendously horrific incident. But it's not a change in terms of the threat picture that has always existed in the Middle East. And then you talk about domestic violent extremists. Mr. Magaziner asked you about risks like January 6th. I know that it is a stock piece in some politics in the United States that January 6th was as bad as 9/11. I don't honestly remember it that way. Maybe some American will disagree with me, or many Americans, Mr. Magaziner, might disagree. But what accounts for that? I mean, it sounds reckless to me. You did not. Ms. Abizaid has not. Other members have not come out and said, this is dangerous to the homeland. I'm accountable, and I'm not going to sit in my position and see the risks you're bound to see that you're not able to tell me about in detail. Why keep quiet about a risk like that we now see manifested in visits to Quantico, a Chechen conducting surveillance on an Army Special Forces colonel in Carthage, North Carolina, leading to a killing, and an Eritrean in Gates County, North Carolina, leading to a standoff with police and a shooting. It just goes on. And it's not domestic violent extremists. So what gives?
A couple things, sir. Thank you for the question, and I understand where you're coming from. If I could just clarify one thing. I didn't finish sort of the chain of reasoning I talked about. I started on about Gaza. You say that there's no change since October 7th. I think if you were to talk to the Jewish community, they would say quite otherwise. They're suffering. They're under threat in a way they weren't before, and that is what I was talking about, that the events overseas have energized threat actors of a variety of different types, foreign as well as domestic, and they're suffering from it. So
yeah, I agree with that.
We put bulletins out about that jointly with the FBI. We've been engaged fully with the Jewish community because this is a sea change, and it's not going to end.
Yeah, I never imagined I would see what I see.
Yeah. It's
vested in the Democratic Party, frankly, in our country. But go ahead.
It's horrendous. But in terms of the threat from foreign terrorism, you asked why I'm not saying anything more about it. I've spent every public moment talking about the terrorism threat, in particular, the threat from foreign terrorism especially since October 7th. And if you look at the Tajik situation, you'll get briefed on that. But it's not lost on us that the people who killed over 150 Russians in that theater were from the same part of the world. Okay, so, and I can tell you that Director Abizaid is working with my team and me on a daily basis. I'm going to be with her tomorrow, and we're working on a daily basis on this very threat and with the Bureau. The amount of, and I mentioned this earlier, it really is unprecedented, the level of cooperation between us and the Bureau on these threats. And I say that with a little bit of perspective because I was in government in the national security space up until Inauguration Day 2009. I left with the Bush administration. And then stepped out of government and then stepped back in 2 years ago. And the amount of real day-to-day operational coordination between DHS and FBI that I'm seeing now, we didn't have anything even close to that back then. So it is unprecedented, it's real, and we're taking it seriously.
Thank you, sir. My time's expired. I recognize